Shadows and Silence, a 2-hour collection of true horror stories. Introduction. Hello and welcome. I'm so glad you're here with me tonight. Before we begin, I want you to take a moment. Get comfortable wherever you are. Let your body relax. Let the tension leave your shoulders. Let the sound of rain wash over you. Create a barrier between you and the world outside. What you're about to hear over the next 2 hours are 4 stories. 4 accounts of experiences that defy easy explanation. Each one different in nature. Each one unsettling in its own way. These aren't fabricated tales designed simply to frighten you. They're based on real testimonies. Real moments when ordinary people encountered something that challenged everything they thought they understood about reality. The first story will take us into the mind of someone who couldn't trust their own perception. The second will introduce us to a presence that existed just beyond the edge of sight. The third will reveal an event so strange that even those who witnessed it struggle to accept what happened. And the fourth will show us how old legends sometimes have roots deeper than we want to believe. Over these 2 hours, let the rain be your constant companion. Let it ground you. Remind you that you're safe. That you're here. Listening. Not there. Not experiencing what these people experienced. Our first story begins in a small apartment. A place that should have been a sanctuary. A refuge. But became instead a prison of doubt. A maze of uncertainty. A space where reality itself became questionable. So settle in. Let the rain continue. And let's begin our journey into the spaces between what we know and what we fear. Story 1. The Mirror. Have you ever looked in a mirror and for just a fraction of a second seen something behind you that wasn't there when you turned around? This is the account of Rebecca Chen. She was 29 years old when this happened. Working as a freelance writer. Living alone in a studio apartment in Seattle. Independent. Rational. Not someone prone to flights of imagination or paranoid thinking. She'd always prided herself on being grounded. Logical. Someone who dealt in facts and observable reality. But over the course of 6 weeks, that certainty was systematically dismantled. Piece by piece. Reflection by reflection. Until she could no longer trust the most basic tool of self-perception. The mirror. Rebecca had moved into the apartment in late January. It was small but affordable. One large room that served as bedroom and living space. A tiny kitchen. A bathroom. The building was old. Early 1900s. Hardwood floors that creaked. Radiator heat that clanked and hissed. High ceilings with original crown molding. The kind of place that had character. History. The kind of place that had seen generations of tenants come and go. The bathroom had a large mirror over the sink. It was original to the apartment. Heavy glass. Slightly warped with age. The silvering on the back had degraded in places, creating dark spots, imperfections. But Rebecca liked it. Liked the vintage quality. The way it made her bathroom feel like stepping back in time. For the first 2 weeks, everything was normal. She'd brush her teeth, wash her face, apply makeup. All the ordinary rituals performed in front of that mirror. Never thinking about it. Never noticing anything unusual. Just using it as mirrors are meant to be used. A tool for seeing yourself. For checking your appearance. For confirming you exist in the shape you believe you do. Then one morning in early February, she noticed something. She was brushing her teeth. Half awake. Mind elsewhere. She glanced up at her reflection. And behind her, in the mirror, she saw movement. Just a flicker. A shadow passing across the bathroom doorway behind her. She turned quickly, toothbrush still in her mouth. Looked at the actual doorway. Nothing there. Empty space. The door to her main room stood open. Beyond it she could see her bed. Her desk. Morning light coming through the windows. Everything normal. Everything still. She turned back to the mirror. Looked at the reflection of the doorway. Nothing. No movement. No shadow. Just the empty door frame reflected in old glass. She told herself it was nothing. A trick of the light. The old mirror creating optical illusions with its imperfections. Her tired eyes seeing patterns that weren't there. She finished brushing her teeth, went about her day, forgot about it. But it happened again 2 days later. Same scenario. Morning routine. Standing at the sink. She glanced up. In the mirror behind her she saw a figure. Just for an instant. Standing in the doorway. Watching her. Then gone. She spun around. Heart suddenly racing. The doorway was empty. She walked to it. Looked into her main room. Looked at her front door. It was locked. Chain in place. No one could have entered. No one could have been standing there. She was alone. Had been alone all night. Was definitely alone now. Rebecca stood in her bathroom doorway for a long time, looking back and forth. From the actual space to its reflection in the mirror. They matched. Perfectly. No discrepancies. No figures. No shadows. Nothing that shouldn't be there. She started to wonder about her mental state. Stress could do strange things. She'd been working long hours. Deadline pressure. Not sleeping well. Maybe her brain was creating hallucinations. Brief visual glitches. Nothing to worry about. Just a sign she needed more rest. Better self-care. She made a conscious effort to take it easy. To sleep more. To reduce her caffeine intake. To take breaks during the day. For a week she felt better. More rested. More clear-headed. The mirror incident stopped. She thought she'd solved the problem. Then it escalated. She was getting ready for bed. Washing her face. She looked up. In the mirror she saw herself. But her reflection was wrong. Subtly wrong. The angle of her head was slightly different. The expression on her reflected face didn't quite match what she was doing. Like watching herself on a video with a half-second delay. Her reflection lagging behind her actual movements. She moved her hand to her face. In the mirror her reflection did the same. But slower. A fraction of a second slower. She blinked. Her reflection blinked. But the timing was off. Just barely. Just enough to notice. Just enough to make her skin crawl. She stepped back from the mirror. Her reflection stepped back. But again. Delayed. Like the mirror was showing her not what she was doing but what she had done a moment before. Like looking at the past instead of the present. Rebecca left the bathroom. Turned off the light. Closed the door. Sat on her bed breathing hard. This was different. This wasn't a shadow or a figure. This was her own reflection behaving impossibly. Mirrors don't work that way. They can't. They're just glass and silver. They reflect light. They show what's in front of them. In real time. Instantly. That's physics. That's how reality works. But her reflection had been delayed. She was certain of it. Had seen it clearly. Had tested it multiple times. The lag was real. Undeniable. Impossible. She didn't use that bathroom mirror for 3 days. Washed her face at the kitchen sink. Avoided looking at it. Avoided confronting what she'd seen. But she couldn't avoid it forever. It was her only mirror. She needed it. Needed to see herself. Needed that basic confirmation of existence that mirrors provide. On the 4th day she went back. Cautiously. She stood in front of the mirror. Looked at her reflection. Everything seemed normal. Perfectly synchronized. She moved her hand. Her reflection moved simultaneously. She blinked. Her reflection blinked at the same instant. Everything as it should be. She felt relief. Felt foolish. Felt like maybe she had imagined the whole thing. Like stress and exhaustion had created a false memory. A hallucination she'd convinced herself was real. She went back to using the mirror normally. Tried to forget what she'd experienced. But the mirror wasn't finished with her. A week later she woke in the middle of the night. 3 a.m. She'd drunk too much water before bed. Needed the bathroom. She got up. Half asleep. Stumbled into the bathroom. Didn't turn on the light. Just enough ambient light from the street to see. She used the toilet. Washed her hands. And as she was drying them she glanced up at the mirror. Someone was standing behind her. Not a shadow, not a flicker. A person, clear, distinct, standing in the doorway, watching her. She could see them perfectly in the mirror. A woman, wearing old-fashioned clothing, long dark dress, hair pulled back, face pale, expression neutral, just standing there, staring at Rebecca's reflection. Rebecca froze, every muscle locked. She couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't look away from that impossible figure in the mirror. Time seemed to stop. The woman in the mirror didn't move, didn't blink, just stared. Then Rebecca's survival instinct kicked in. She spun around, fast, desperate, ready to confront, ready to run, ready to scream. The doorway was empty. No woman, no figure, just darkness and the faint outline of her furniture beyond. She turned on the bathroom light, flooded the space with harsh illumination, checked every corner, looked into her main room, checked her front door, still locked, still chained. She was alone, completely alone. But the woman had been there, in the mirror. Rebecca had seen her, as clearly as she'd ever seen anything. Not a trick of light, not a hallucination. A solid figure, present, real, in the reflection if not in reality. Rebecca didn't sleep the rest of that night. Sat on her bed with all the lights on, staring at her bathroom door, trying to understand, trying to rationalize, trying to find any explanation that made sense. By morning she'd decided. The mirror had to go. Whatever was wrong with it, whatever was happening, she couldn't live with it anymore. Couldn't spend another night in this apartment knowing that mirror existed, that it showed things that shouldn't be there, that it revealed a world slightly different from the one she inhabited. She called her landlord, told him she wanted to replace the bathroom mirror, that it was damaged. The landlord was hesitant. The mirror was original to the building, historic. He didn't want it removed. Rebecca insisted, said she'd pay for a new one, said she'd have the old one carefully stored if he wanted to keep it. He reluctantly agreed. That afternoon she hired someone to remove the mirror, a handyman. He carefully took it down, lifted it off the wall. As he did, Rebecca saw what was behind it, the wall where the mirror had hung. There was something written there, on the plaster, in faded pencil. Words. A message. She is still here watching from the other side. Do not look too long or she will see you too. The handwriting was old, shaky, like it had been written by someone afraid. Someone warning future occupants. Someone who knew, who had experienced what Rebecca was experiencing. The handyman saw it too. Read it. Looked at Rebecca. You want me to paint over this? No. Leave it. I want to see it. Want to remember. He shrugged. Took the mirror away. Mounted a new modern mirror in its place. Plain. Simple. Mass-produced. Rebecca paid him. Thanked him. And after he left, she stood in her bathroom staring at that message on the wall. Who had written it? When? What had they seen? Had they seen the same woman? The same delayed reflections? The same impossible things Rebecca had witnessed? She researched the building. Tried to find its history. Found old newspaper articles. Census records. Photos. The building had been constructed in 1912. Originally a boarding house, later converted to apartments. Many people had lived there over the decades. Many tenants in this specific unit. She found an obituary from 1947. A woman named Dorothy Mills. She'd lived in this building. Died in her apartment. Alone. The circumstances were unclear. Possible suicide. Possible accident. Her body had been found after several days. In the bathroom. Rebecca stared at the photograph accompanying the obituary. The woman looked familiar. The face. The way she held herself. It looked very much like the figure she'd seen in the mirror. She stopped researching. Didn't want to know more. Didn't want to confirm what she suspected. That Dorothy Mills had somehow remained in this apartment, had somehow found a way to exist in reflections, in mirrors, in the space between light and silver, watching, waiting, trying to be seen, trying to connect with the living world she'd left behind. The new mirror showed only what it should. Rebecca's reflection, perfectly synchronized. No delays, no figures in doorways, no impossible things. Everything normal, everything safe. But Rebecca couldn't shake the feeling, the knowledge, that Dorothy was still there, still watching, just unable to manifest now that the old mirror was gone, unable to bridge the gap, unable to be seen. And sometimes late at night Rebecca would look at the new mirror and wonder if Dorothy was frustrated, angry, desperate, trapped in a space adjacent to reality, able to see out but unable to be seen, unable to communicate, unable to do anything but watch as the living went about their lives, unaware, unknowing, safe behind modern glass that didn't allow passage, didn't allow connection, didn't allow the dead to reach through. Rebecca lived in that apartment for another year. She never saw Dorothy again, never experienced anything unusual with the new mirror. Everything remained normal, but she never forgot, never stopped thinking about that message on the wall, about the woman in the mirror, about the possibility that some people don't fully leave, don't fully cross over. Instead they linger, trapped in reflections, in the spaces where we see ourselves, watching us as we live, as we age, as we eventually join them in whatever comes after. She moved out eventually. New job, new city, new apartment. But she always checks now. Always looks at bathroom mirrors before she rents a place. Checks if they're old. Checks if they have that certain quality, that warping, that degradation of silver, that might allow something through, that might show more than it should. And she always wonders about the new tenant in her old apartment. If they ever noticed anything, if they ever saw movement in the new mirror, if Dorothy found a way, found a crack, found a method to be seen again, to continue her vigil, to keep watching from the other side. Because mirrors are strange things. We trust them, use them every day, assume they show us truth, show us reality, show us ourselves as we truly are. But what if they show more? What if they're not just reflective surfaces but windows, portals, thin places where one world touches another, where the dead can look through, can watch, can wait? And what if some mirrors are thinner than others? What if old mirrors, mirrors that have reflected countless faces over countless years, what if they wear down? Not just the silver, but the barrier, the separation between here and there, between now and then, between living and dead. What if right now as you look in your mirror someone is looking back? Not your reflection, but something else, someone else, watching you, studying you, waiting for you to notice, waiting for you to see them, waiting in the glass. Look closely next time. Look at the edges of your reflection, at the shadows behind you, at the space just beyond what should be visible, and ask yourself, is that all that's there? Or is there something more? Something watching, something waiting, something that exists in the mirror but nowhere else? Rebecca knows the answer. She learned it in that old bathroom, in that antique mirror, in those 6 weeks when reality bent, when reflections lied, when the dead made themselves seen. And now you know too. Now you'll wonder. Now you'll look at mirrors differently. See them not as tools but as risks, as gateways, as places where careful observation might reveal what should stay hidden. The woman in the mirror is still there, still watching, still waiting, in old glass and degraded silver, in the reflections we trust, in the images we assume ourselves and nothing more. But they're never just ourselves. They're also doorways, and sometimes, rarely, the door opens, and something looks through, and you see them seeing you, and nothing is ever quite the same again. Story 2, The Passenger. What would you do if you picked up a hitchhiker who vanished from your locked car while you were driving 70 miles per hour? This is the story of Martin Keller, a long-haul trucker, 52 years old, 28 years on the road. He'd seen everything, every kind of weather, every kind of road condition, every kind of strange situation that highways offer. He thought nothing could surprise him anymore. Thought he'd developed immunity to the weird, the unexpected, the impossible. He was wrong. It happened on a cold March night. Martin was hauling freight from Minneapolis to Billings, a route he'd driven hundreds of times. Interstate 94 west through North Dakota. Empty country. Long stretches between towns. Dark. Isolated. The kind of driving where you're alone with your thoughts for hours. Where the road and the darkness and the drone of your engine become a kind of meditation. The weather was clear. Cold but dry. Stars visible. Good conditions. Martin had been driving for 6 hours. Was about halfway through his route. Somewhere past Bismarck. The highway stretched ahead. Empty. He hadn't seen another vehicle in over an hour. Then his headlights caught something. Someone. Standing on the shoulder of the road. Thumb out. Hitchhiking. Martin's first instinct was to pass. He didn't pick up hitchhikers. Company policy. Insurance issues. Too many risks. But something made him slow down. Made him look. Made him reconsider. The figure was young. Male. Maybe early 20s. Wearing a light jacket. No hat. No gloves. Inappropriate for the temperature. It was below zero out there. Wind chill making it even colder. Standing out there in those clothes. The kid would freeze. Martin made a decision. He pulled over. Stopped his truck. The figure approached. Martin rolled down his passenger window. Where you headed? West. Anywhere west. Please. I've been out here for hours. So cold. The voice was shaking. The young man's face was pale. Lips almost blue. He was in real trouble. Real danger. Get in. I can take you as far as the next town. Get you warmed up. Thank you. Thank you so much. The young man climbed into the cab. Martin turned up the heat. Pulled back onto the highway. As they drove, Martin glanced over at his passenger. Now that he was in better light, Martin could see him more clearly. Early 20s. Dark hair. Thin face. Wearing jeans and a denim jacket. The clothes looked old. Worn. Not quite right somehow. But Martin couldn't identify why. What's your name? Daniel. What were you doing out there, Daniel? That's not a safe place to be. Especially in this weather. Car broke down. Miles back. Tried to walk to the next town but too far. Too cold. Started to think I wasn't going to make it. Why didn't you call someone? You have a phone. Daniel looked down. Dead battery. Everything went wrong at once. Martin nodded. He understood. Sometimes that's how things went. One problem cascading into many. Bad luck compounding. He was glad he'd stopped. Glad he could help. The kid would have died out there. No question. They drove in silence for a while. Martin focused on the road. Daniel sat quietly, warming up. Martin noticed the kid wasn't shivering anymore. Color was returning to his face. Good. He'd be okay. After about 20 minutes, Martin spoke. There's a truck stop coming up in about 40 miles. Town called Glen Allen. I can drop you there. They'll have a phone you can use. Maybe someone who can help with your car. That would be great. Thank you. More silence. Martin glanced over occasionally. Daniel was staring out the window, watching the darkness pass. The empty landscape. The scattered lights of distant farms. His expression was strange. Sad. Wistful. Like he was seeing something Martin couldn't see. Remembering something from long ago. Martin turned on the radio. Found a station playing old country music. Kept the volume low. Just enough to fill the silence. Make the cab feel less empty, less strange. Around 30 minutes into the drive, Martin noticed something odd. Daniel hadn't moved at all, hadn't shifted position, hadn't adjusted his seatbelt, hadn't touched the window or the door, just sat perfectly still, staring out into the darkness. "You okay there, Daniel?" No response. Daniel didn't turn, didn't acknowledge the question, just kept staring. Martin felt uneasy. Something was wrong. He reached over, tapped Daniel's shoulder. His hand went through. Not through like Daniel wasn't solid. Through like Daniel wasn't there. Martin's hand passed through the space where Daniel's shoulder should have been and touched nothing. Just air. Just empty space. Martin jerked his hand back. Looked at Daniel. He was still visible. Still sitting there. Still staring out the window. But somehow he wasn't actually there. Wasn't solid. Wasn't real. Martin's heart was racing. He looked at the road. Looked back at Daniel. Still there. Visible. Present. But intangible. Impossible. Who? What are you? Daniel finally turned. Looked at Martin. His eyes were sad. Ancient. Filled with something Martin couldn't name. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to frighten you. I needed to ride one more time. Feel the road. Feel the movement. I've been standing on that shoulder for, I don't know how long, hoping someone would stop, would let me in, would let me remember what it felt like to be going somewhere." Martin's hands were gripping the steering wheel, knuckles white. His mind was trying to process, trying to understand. You're not alive, are you?" Daniel shook his head. "I died there, on that stretch of highway. Car accident. Long time ago. I've been there ever since. Watching trucks pass. Watching people drive by. No one stops. No one sees me. But you. You stopped. You saw me. You let me in. And I'm grateful. So grateful to feel this again. To feel like I'm going somewhere. Even if it's nowhere. When did you die?" Daniel looked back out the window. 1973. March 15th. I was 22 years old. Driving to see my girlfriend. She lived in Montana. I was going to ask her to marry me, but I never made it. Ice on the road. Lost control. The car rolled. It was quick. They told me it was quick. Martin didn't know what to say. Didn't know what to do. He was driving 70 miles per hour with a ghost in his passenger seat. A ghost who'd been standing on that highway for 50 years. Waiting. Hoping. Trying to finish a journey that ended before it began. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry that happened to you." Daniel smiled. It was a sad smile. Full of loss. "It's okay. It was a long time ago. Everything I knew is gone now. Everyone I loved is. They're all gone too. I'm just an echo. A memory that won't fade. A moment frozen on that highway forever." They drove in silence. Martin didn't know how long. Time felt strange. Elastic. Eventually he saw lights ahead. The truck stop. Glen Allen. He slowed down. Pulled off the exit. As he did, Daniel spoke again. "Thank you. For stopping. For letting me ride. It means more than you know. To feel motion again. To feel like I was alive. Even for just a little while." Martin pulled into the truck stop parking lot. Stopped the truck. Turned to Daniel. To say something. To offer some comfort. Some acknowledgement. But Daniel was gone. The passenger seat was empty. Like he'd never been there. Like the entire thing had been a hallucination. A dream. A trick of the mind after too many hours on the road. But Martin knew better. Knew what he'd seen. What he'd heard. What he'd felt when his hand passed through nothing where Daniel's shoulder should have been. He sat in his truck for a long time. Just sitting. Processing. Eventually he went inside the truck stop. Got coffee. tried to act normal, tried to pretend nothing had happened. While he was there, he asked the counter attendant, asked if there had ever been a bad accident on the highway east of here. The attendant was an older woman, local. She'd worked there for decades. Oh sure, lots of accidents over the years. Dangerous road in winter. Why do you ask? Just curious. Anything particularly bad? Anything memorable? She thought for a moment. There was one. Way back. Before my time, but everyone knew about it. Young man died. Early 70s, I think. Car accident. They said he was on his way to propose to his girlfriend. Tragic. His family put up a memorial marker. It's still there if you know where to look. Martin thanked her, went back to his truck, drove back onto the highway, heading west, continuing his route. But he drove slowly past that stretch where he'd picked up Daniel, watched the shoulder, looking for, he didn't know what, a marker, a cross, some indication of where it happened. He found it, small white cross, faded, weathered by 50 years of wind and snow and sun. He could barely read the name in his headlights as he passed, but he saw it. Daniel Morrison, 1951 to 1973. Forever loved, forever missed. Martin continued driving, made his delivery, completed his route. But he never forgot that night. Never forgot the passenger who wasn't there. The ghost who just wanted to ride, to feel movement, to remember what it was like to be going somewhere with purpose, with hope, with a future. He drives that route still, has for years since that night, and every time, every single time, he slows down at that spot, looks at the shoulder, watches for a figure with a thumb out, hoping to see Daniel again, to offer him another ride, another brief moment of feeling alive. Feeling like he's still on his way to Montana, still going to see his girlfriend, still carrying that ring, still believing in a future that was taken from him 50 years ago. Sometimes Martin thinks he sees him, just for a second, a figure in the darkness. But when he stops, when he pulls over, there's no one there, just empty highway, just cold wind. Just the memory of a young man who died too soon and couldn't let go, couldn't move on, couldn't accept that his journey ended before he reached his destination. And Martin understands why Daniel lingers, why he stands on that shoulder year after year, decade after decade, hoping for one more ride, one more chance to feel motion, to feel purpose, to feel like he's still going somewhere even though he's been nowhere for 50 years. Because some journeys don't end when we die. Some destinations stay forever unreached. Some roads we walk forever, never arriving, never leaving, just existing in the space between where we were and where we meant to be. Daniel is still there, still waiting, still hoping, still standing on that cold North Dakota highway with his thumb out. And maybe one night, maybe when the conditions are right, when someone else is driving alone through that darkness, they'll see him too. They'll stop. They'll offer him a ride. And for 30 minutes, 40 minutes, however long it lasts, Daniel will remember, will feel alive, will believe again that he's on his way to propose to the woman he loved, that his future is still ahead of him, that the accident hasn't happened yet, that he still has time, until the ride ends. Until he vanishes, until he's back on that shoulder, waiting, always waiting, for the next driver kind enough to stop, brave enough to pick up a hitchhiker who's been standing there for 50 years, who will never reach his destination, who will never finish his journey, who will never move beyond that frozen moment when everything ended and nothing began. The road goes on, traffic passes, years become decades, and Daniel waits, patient, eternal, hoping for one more ride, one more moment of motion, one more chance to feel like he's going somewhere, even though the only place he's going is back to that shoulder, back to that waiting, Back to that endless night that never ends. If you drive through North Dakota, if you take Interstate 94 West, if you see a figure on the shoulder late at night, young man, light jacket, thumb out, maybe stop, maybe offer him a ride, maybe give him 30 minutes of feeling alive again, of remembering what it was like to have somewhere to go, someone to see, a future to reach. He's harmless, just sad, just lost, just a young man who never got to propose, never got to marry, never got to live the life he planned. But for those 30 minutes in your passenger seat, he'll remember, he'll hope, he'll believe, and maybe that's enough. Maybe that's all any ghost really wants. Not to haunt, not to frighten, just to be remembered, to be seen, to be allowed one more moment of the life they lost, the future that was taken, the journey that never finished. Daniel is still waiting, still hoping, still standing on that dark highway, and somewhere ahead, someone will stop, someone will let him in, someone will give him one more ride toward a destination he'll never reach, a love he'll never declare, a life he'll never live. But for those 30 minutes, he'll remember what it felt like to be alive, to be going somewhere, to have hope. And sometimes that's all we need. That's all any of us need. Living or dead. Just one more ride. One more chance. One more moment of feeling like our journey means something. Even if it never ends. Even if we never arrive. Even if we're forever traveling toward a destination that stays always just out of reach. The road continues. The night continues. And Daniel waits. Forever young. Forever hopeful, forever on his way to propose to a woman who died 40 years ago, never knowing, never accepting, never understanding that the journey is over, that the ride has ended, that the only destination left is the shoulder where he stands, eternally waiting, eternally hoping, eternally believing that the next truck will take him all the way, will get him there, will let him finish what he started. But it never does. And it never will. And Daniel will wait. Forever. Story 3. The recording. Have you ever heard your own voice saying things you never said in a recording you don't remember making? This is what happened to Dr. Sarah Mitchell, a professor of linguistics, 43 years old. She spent her career studying language, phonetics, speech patterns, the mechanics of human communication. Her work involved recording countless hours of audio, interviews, lectures, language samples. She understood sound, understood recording technology, understood the limitations and capabilities of audio equipment, which is why what she discovered on her office computer 3 months ago terrified her so completely, because it violated everything she knew, everything she understood, everything that should be possible. Sarah worked at a university in Boston. She had a small office on the 3rd floor of the linguistics building. The office was cluttered, books stacked everywhere, papers covering every surface, recording equipment on her desk, microphones, digital recorders, a computer with audio editing software, standard setup for her field. She'd been working late one evening in November, grading papers. The building was quiet. Most faculty had gone home hours ago. She liked working late sometimes, enjoyed the silence, the lack of interruption, the feeling of being alone with her thoughts and her work. Around 9 p.m. she decided to organize some of her audio files. She had hundreds, thousands, years of recordings, research interviews, lecture captures, language samples from various studies. They were poorly organized, scattered across different folders, different dates. She'd been meaning to clean them up for months. She started going through the files, listening to snippets, identifying what each one was, creating a better filing system, naming things properly, deleting duplicates. Most of the files were exactly what she expected. Her own voice lecturing, interview subjects speaking, standard academic content. Nothing unusual. Nothing concerning. Then she found a file she didn't recognize. It was dated from 2 weeks ago, Tuesday, November 7th. The file name was just a string of numbers. No descriptive label. She didn't remember recording anything that day, but she had dozens of recordings. Easy to forget one. She opened the file, hit play, expected to hear a lecture or an interview. Instead, she heard something else. She heard her own voice, but not lecturing, not interviewing, just talking, speaking continuously, and what she was saying made no sense. The coordinates are shifting. Can you feel it? The baseline is degrading. We're running out of time. The intersection happens at midnight. You need to be there. You need to witness. You need to understand what's coming through. Sarah stopped the playback, stared at her computer screen. That was her voice, undeniably, but she had absolutely no memory of saying those words. Recording that file. What coordinates? What intersection? What was coming through? She played it again, listening more carefully. The audio quality was good, clear, recorded on professional equipment. Her voice sounded normal, not distressed, not coerced, just speaking calmly, rationally, as if reading from a script. But she hadn't recorded this. She was certain. She would remember saying something so strange, so cryptic, so unlike anything she would normally say. She checked the file metadata. Recorded at 11:47 p.m. on November 7th. Location tagged as her office. Equipment identified as her primary recording microphone. The file was created on her computer, using her software, with her voice, in her office. But she hadn't been in her office that late on November 7th. She'd left at 6 p.m., gone home, had dinner, watched television, gone to bed around 10. She had a clear memory of that evening. It was unremarkable, routine. Definitely didn't involve being in her office at midnight recording cryptic messages. Sarah felt cold dread settling in her stomach. Someone had used her equipment, had been in her office, had recorded something using her voice. But that didn't make sense either. The voice was perfect, not synthesized, not manipulated. It was her. Her patterns, her inflections, her breathing, everything. She kept listening to the file. It continued for 17 minutes. Her voice speaking continuously, describing things she didn't understand. Coordinates, time signatures, dimensional intersections. Phrases that sounded scientific but made no sense. Like someone had taken technical terminology and arranged it randomly. Or like she was describing phenomena that didn't exist in conventional science. The last thing the recording said was this: "If you're hearing this, then it worked. Then I managed to send the message back. You need to listen. You need to prepare. On November 21st at 11:53 p.m. you'll understand. You'll see what I see. What we've discovered. What's been here all along. Go to the observation deck. Bring the recorder. Document everything. This is the most important work you'll ever do. The only work that matters. Everything changes. Everything." Then silence. The recording ended. Sarah sat in her office, mind racing. November 21st. That was 5 days away. What was supposed to happen? What observation deck? There were several on campus. The astronomy building. The architecture building. The library tower. Which one? She considered calling security, reporting a break-in. But nothing was stolen. Nothing damaged. Just this one impossible recording. They'd think she was crazy. Or worse, they'd think she recorded it herself. Had some kind of episode. Some break with reality. She decided to investigate on her own. She checked her office logs. The building had keycard access after hours. Her card had been swiped at 11:42 p.m. on November 7th. Entering her office. And again at 12:09 a.m. on November 8th. Leaving. But she hadn't been there. She was home. She'd used her card to leave the building at 6 p.m. Then nothing until the next morning. Except these entries, showing she'd entered late at night, stayed for 27 minutes. The exact time span of the recording. Sarah checked her calendar, her phone, her emails, looking for any gap, any missing time, any explanation for how she could have been in two places at once. Nothing. Her evening of November 7th was accounted for, documented, real, which meant something impossible had happened. Either someone had cloned her keycard and her voice, or she had been in her office, recording that message, with no memory of doing it, no awareness, no conscious knowledge. The thought terrified her more than she wanted to admit. What if she had created that recording? What if some part of her, some aspect of her consciousness, operated independently, did things she didn't remember, didn't control, spoke words she didn't consciously choose? She listened to the recording dozens of times over the next few days, analyzed it professionally, ran it through her software, checked for signs of manipulation, synthesis, AI generation, found nothing. It was authentic, real, unaltered. Her voice saying impossible things in a recording she didn't remember making. November 21st approached. Sarah couldn't focus on anything else. The message had been so specific, so insistent, so certain that she would understand, that everything would change. She decided she had to go, had to see, had to know if any of this was real or if she was losing her mind. She chose the astronomy building observation deck. It was the most literal interpretation of the phrase, the highest point on campus, open to the sky. On November 21st, she went to her office at 11 p.m., brought her recording equipment, just as the message had instructed. She felt ridiculous, felt like she was indulging a delusion, but she couldn't not go, couldn't not try to understand. She took the elevator to the top floor of the astronomy building, walked out onto the observation deck. It was cold, clear night, stars visible, the city lights of Boston glowing in the distance. She was alone. The building was locked, empty. She'd used her faculty access to get in. She set up her recorder, checked the time, 11:49 p.m. For minutes until the time specified in the recording. She waited, watching the sky, watching the city, seeing nothing unusual, nothing remarkable, just a normal November night. 11:53 arrived. Sarah held her breath, watching, waiting, expecting. What? She didn't know. Something, anything, some sign that the message had meaning, that this wasn't a waste of time, that she wasn't having a mental breakdown. At first nothing happened, just the normal night, normal sky, normal world. She started to feel foolish, started to turn away, started to accept that she'd been chasing nothing. Then she felt it, a pressure change, subtle, like the air had become denser, heavier. The quality of light shifted, not darker, but different, like looking through a filter that changed wavelengths, made everything slightly wrong. And she heard sound, not external sound, internal, like it was coming from inside her head, inside her thoughts. Voices, many voices, speaking simultaneously, overlapping. She couldn't make out individual words, just a chorus, a cacophony, voices from elsewhere, somewhere else. She grabbed her recorder, hit record, capturing. She didn't know what. The sound, the moment, the impossible thing that was happening. The pressure increased. The light became stranger. She could see. Could she see? Shapes. In the air. In the space between. Geometric patterns. Moving. Shifting. Like the structure of reality was visible. Like she could see the framework underneath. The mathematics. The code. whatever held everything together. And she understood, in that moment, why her future self had sent the message, why this mattered. Because she was seeing something normally invisible, something that existed always but couldn't be perceived, couldn't be accessed, until specific conditions, specific times, specific alignments allowed brief windows, brief glimpses, brief moments of seeing what was always there. She watched for, she didn't know how long. Time felt meaningless, elastic. The patterns continued, the voices continued. She recorded everything, documented, witnessed, tried to understand. Then as suddenly as it began, it stopped. The pressure normalized. The light returned to normal. The voices ceased. The patterns disappeared. She was standing on a cold observation deck, alone, holding a recorder, under a normal November sky. She looked at her recorder, still running. She stopped it, checked the timestamp. She'd recorded for 38 minutes, but it had felt like seconds, like hours, like no time at all. Sarah went back to her office, transferred the recording to her computer, started to listen, dreading, hoping, needing to know what she'd captured, what evidence existed of what she'd experienced. The recording played, and what she heard was her own voice, speaking continuously, for 38 minutes, describing what she was seeing, what she was understanding, using the same cryptic terminology, the same technical language, the same phrases from the original message. But she hadn't spoken, hadn't said a word during those 38 minutes. She'd been silent, watching, listening, not talking, not narrating, not describing anything aloud. Yet here was her voice, on the recording, speaking, explaining, documenting, as if some version of her, some aspect of her consciousness, had operated independently, had used her vocal cords, had created a narrative, while her conscious mind was occupied with witnessing, with experiencing, with trying to comprehend. And she understood how the original message had been created, understood that on November 7th, some version of this had happened, some event, some intersection, some moment of seeing what shouldn't be visible. And during that experience, while her conscious mind was overwhelmed, some other part of her, some deeper awareness, had taken over, had recorded a message, had sent it back to her earlier self, to prepare her, to guide her, to make sure she was ready, was there, was witnessing when it happened again. Sarah has the recordings, both of them. She's analyzed them endlessly, studied them, tried to understand the patterns, the intersections, the times when reality becomes thin enough to see through, to see what's underneath, what's always been there, invisible, inaccessible, until specific moments, specific alignments, specific conditions allow brief windows. She's documented 3 more events since then, times when the message comes, when her other self, her deeper self, records warnings, coordinates, instructions, times when she goes to witness, to document, to record, and times when she discovers her voice on the recorder describing things she didn't consciously speak, things she saw but couldn't process, things that bypass normal awareness and tap into something deeper, something that exists beneath consciousness, beneath volition, beneath the self we think we are. She doesn't know what it means, doesn't know if she's discovering something real, something about the nature of reality, the structure of space and time, the invisible framework that holds everything together, or if she's experiencing something internal, something neurological, some aspect of her mind fragmenting, creating experiences, creating awareness, creating an entire mythology to explain perceptions that have no external source. She doesn't know, can't know, has no way to verify, no way to confirm, no way to separate observation from observer, reality from perception, truth from delusion. All she has are the recordings, her voice, speaking words she doesn't remember, describing things she can't explain, documenting experiences that may or may not exist outside her own consciousness, and the certainty, the absolute certainty, that on specific dates, at specific times, something happens, something opens, something allows her to see, to hear, to witness, and some part of her, some deeper part, takes over, records, documents, sends messages to her earlier self, preparing, warning, guiding, for what purpose, toward what end, she doesn't know. The messages speak of discoveries, of understanding, of everything changing. But what changes? When? How? She's still waiting, still documenting, still going to the coordinates, the times, the places her other self directs, still recording, still witnessing, still trying to understand what's happening to her, what she's becoming, what she's always been but never consciously knew. The recordings continue, the voice continues, her voice, speaking impossible things, describing invisible worlds, guiding her toward understanding she hasn't reached, preparing her for something, something that's coming, something that's always been coming, something that will change everything. But she doesn't know when, doesn't know what, doesn't know if any of it is real, or if she's documenting her own descent into a carefully structured delusion, a mythology her mind has created to make sense of experiences that have no external reality. She only knows that the messages keep coming, the events keep happening, and some part of her keeps recording, keeps speaking, keeps documenting, keeps preparing her for something her conscious mind can't yet comprehend. And maybe that's enough. Maybe that's all she needs. To trust, to follow, to witness, to document, to let her deeper self guide, to accept that consciousness is more complex than we believe, that we contain multitudes, that some part of us operates beyond awareness, beyond control, beyond the limitations of what we think we are. The next event is scheduled for December 15th. The message came 3 days ago, recorded at midnight while she slept. Her voice speaking coordinates, times, instructions, preparing her, guiding her, telling her what she needs to do, where she needs to be, what she needs to witness. She'll go. Of course she'll go. She has to know, has to see, has to document, has to trust that her other self, her deeper self, knows something she doesn't, sees something she can't, understands something beyond her conscious reach, and she'll record, and she'll discover her voice speaking, narrating, explaining, and she'll listen, and she'll try to understand, and she'll wait for the next message, the next coordinate, the next intersection, forever cycling, forever documenting, forever split between the self that witnesses and the self that speaks, between the awareness that experiences and the awareness that explains, between what she sees and what she says, between who she thinks she is and who she actually might be. The recordings continue, the voice continues, and Sarah continues, trapped in a loop of her own making, or discovering something profound, something real, something that exists in the spaces between consciousness and unconsciousness, between self and other, between what we know and what knows us. She doesn't know which, may never know which, can only continue, can only witness, can only let her voice speak, can only trust the messages from the self she doesn't consciously access, the self that operates in the dark, that records in the night, that sees what she can't see, that knows what she doesn't know. And maybe we all have that self, that deeper awareness, that operates beneath our conscious control, that does things we don't remember, says things we don't consciously choose, guides us toward understanding we haven't reached. Maybe we're all receiving messages from our other selves, our deeper selves, and we ignore them, dismiss them, rationalize them away, because accepting them would mean accepting that we're not singular, not unified, not in control, that we're complex, layered, operating on multiple levels simultaneously, and what we think of as ourselves is just the surface, just the conscious layer, while beneath there are other selves, other awarenesses, other voices, speaking, acting, knowing, existing beyond our conscious reach. Sarah's learning to listen, to trust, to accept, to let her deeper self guide, and maybe that's the real discovery, the real understanding, not about the universe, but about ourselves, about the vastness we contain, the mysteries within, the voices that speak when we're silent, the awareness that operates when we're unaware. The next recording will come. It always does. And Sarah will listen. And she'll go. And she'll witness. And she'll discover her voice speaking. And she'll continue. Forever cycling. Forever seeking. Forever split between selves. Forever trying to understand which one is real. Or if they're both real. Or if reality itself is more complex than the question allows. Rain continues softly, static fades. Story 4, The Shepherd's Warning. Have you ever learned that a legend you heard as a child was based on something real and that the warning was meant for you? This is the story of Elena Vasquez. She grew up in a small mountain town in northern New Mexico. Population maybe 300. The kind of place where everyone knows everyone. Where families have lived for generations. Where traditions and stories are passed down. Preserved, protected. When Elena was a child, her grandmother used to tell her stories. Old stories. From the time before the town existed. Before the Spanish came. Before recorded history. Stories that had been told in that valley for hundreds, maybe thousands of years. Stories about the land, the mountains, the things that lived there. One story in particular stayed with Elena. The story of El Pastor, the shepherd. Her grandmother would tell it on winter nights, when the wind howled down from the peaks, when snow buried the town, when darkness came early and stayed late. The story went like this. Long ago, before people lived in the valley, before there were houses or roads or fences, the mountains were home to something else, something old. Something that watched over the land like a shepherd watches over sheep. Something that protected, that guided, that kept balance. But when people came, when they built, when they claimed, the shepherd became angry, became protective, became territorial. It would appear to those who ventured too far, who took too much, who disrespected the land. It would appear as a figure, tall, cloaked, carrying a staff, walking the high ridges, watching, waiting, and if you saw the shepherd, if you looked into its eyes, if you heard its voice, you had 3 days to leave, to return what you'd taken, to make amends, or the shepherd would take something from you, something precious, something irreplaceable, a price for your transgression. Elena's grandmother told this story seriously, gravely, like it was history, like it was true, not a fairy tale, not a myth, but a warning, a real warning about a real danger. And she always ended the same way. If you ever see the shepherd, if you ever hear its voice calling your name, run, don't look back, don't try to understand, don't try to negotiate, just leave. Leave immediately. Leave everything. Because the shepherd doesn't forgive, doesn't forget, doesn't accept excuses. It only collects debts. Elena listened as a child, but she didn't believe. Not really. It was just a story, just something to scare kids. Keep them from wandering too far into the mountains. Keep them safe. Nothing more. She grew up, went to college, became a wildlife biologist, moved away from the small town, away from the mountains, away from the old stories and old ways, built a modern life, based on science, on evidence, on rational understanding of the world. But after her grandmother died, Elena felt pulled back, felt the need to return, to reconnect, to spend time in the place she'd grown from. She took a sabbatical, rented a small cabin on the edge of town, planned to spend 6 months there, working on research, writing, remembering. The cabin was isolated, 2 miles from town, up a dirt road, surrounded by national forest. Beautiful, peaceful, exactly what she needed. She moved in during late September, as autumn was turning the aspens gold, as the air was getting crisp, as the mountains were preparing for winter. She settled into a routine. Work during the day, hiking in the afternoon, evenings spent reading, writing, watching the sunset paint the peaks orange and red. It was exactly what she'd hoped for, exactly what she needed. Then one evening in early October she decided to hike a new trail, one that led up to a high ridge, a place she'd never been. The trail was steep, challenging, but beautiful, views opening up as she climbed. The whole valley spread below, the town tiny, insignificant, dwarfed by the vast landscape. She reached the ridge just before sunset, stood there breathing hard, taking in the view. The wind was strong up there, cold. She could see storms building to the west, dark clouds. She'd need to head back soon, before it got dark, before the weather turned. That's when she saw it. Saw them. A herd of bighorn sheep, maybe 20 of them, rare, endangered, beautiful animals. They were grazing on the slope below the ridge, unaware of her, peaceful, natural. Elena's biologist instincts kicked in. This was an opportunity. She needed to document this, count them, note their condition, their location, valuable data. She pulled out her phone, started taking photos, recording observations, excited by the discovery. She was so focused on the sheep she didn't notice the figure, didn't see it until it was close, didn't register its presence until it spoke. "You should not be here." Elena jumped, turned. A man was standing maybe 10 feet away, tall, older, wearing a long dark coat, leaning on a wooden staff. She hadn't heard him approach, hadn't sensed anyone else on the ridge. "I'm sorry, I didn't. I'm just hiking, documenting the bighorns. For research." The man didn't move, just stood there, looking at her. His face was weathered, lined, eyes dark, deep, ancient. He looked familiar somehow, like she'd seen him before, but she knew she hadn't. She would remember. "The sheep are not for you. This place is not for you. You need to leave. Go back to where you came from." Elena felt irritation. Who was this guy? Some local shepherd? This was public land, national forest. She had every right to be here. "I have permission to be here. I'm a biologist. I'm doing research. These sheep are endangered. I need to document them." The man's expression didn't change, didn't react to her words, just kept staring with those dark ancient eyes. 3 days. You have 3 days to leave this mountain, to return to your life. If you're still here after 3 days, if you continue to take what isn't yours, there will be a price. A chill ran down Elena's spine, not from the cold, from something else, from the way he said it, the certainty, the finality, and from the words. 3 days, just like the story, just like her grandmother's warning. "Who are you?" The man turned, started walking away, down the ridge, moving with easy confidence, disappearing into the gathering dusk. "Wait, what do you mean? What price?" But he was gone, vanished into the shadows and the rocks, like he'd never been there, like she'd imagined the whole encounter. Elena stood on that ridge as darkness fell, her heart racing, her mind trying to rationalize. Just a local, protective of the land, superstitious, didn't like outsiders, trying to scare her, nothing more. But she couldn't shake the feeling, couldn't shake his eyes, his voice, his words. 3 days, just like the story. She hiked back to her cabin, faster than she'd climbed, nearly running. The forest felt different now, darker, more aware, like something was watching, tracking, waiting. Back at the cabin she locked the doors, told herself she was being ridiculous. It was just an odd encounter, nothing supernatural, nothing to fear. She'd continue her work, stay her planned 6 months, not be driven away by local superstition. But that night she dreamed of her grandmother, sitting by her bed, looking sad, disappointed. Why didn't you listen, Mija? Why didn't you believe? The stories are real. The shepherd is real. And now you have 3 days. 3 days to leave or lose something you can't replace. Elena woke in darkness, sweating, heart pounding. Just a dream. Just her subconscious processing the encounter. Nothing more. But she couldn't sleep again. Couldn't shake the unease. At first light she drove into town. Asked around. Described the man she'd seen. Tall. Old. Dark coat. Staff. Did anyone know him? Was he a local shepherd? A hermit living in the mountains? The people she asked looked at her strangely. There was no one like that. No shepherds working that area. No hermits. The bighorn herds were wild, unmanaged. No one tended them. She must have been mistaken. Maybe saw a hiker. Misjudged the distance. The light. Created details that weren't there. But Elena knew what she'd seen. Knew what she'd heard. And the more people denied it, the more worried she became. She looked up the old stories. The legend of El Pastor. Found references in local history archives. Accounts going back centuries. Indigenous stories. Spanish colonial records. Modern folklore collections. All describing the same thing. A tall figure. A shepherd. Appearing to those who took from the land. Warning them. 3 days. Then exacting a price. The accounts were consistent. Too consistent. Descriptions matching across hundreds of years. Same appearance. Same warning. Same consequences. People losing things. Children disappearing. Loved ones dying. Fortunes collapsing. Always 3 days after seeing the shepherd. Always preceded by taking something from the mountains. From the places he protected. Elena felt fear settling deeper. Real fear. This wasn't superstition. This was something. Something documented. Something consistent. Something real. She decided to leave. Pack up. Go back to the city. Come back another time. When? When what? When the shepherd wasn't watching. When she hadn't transgressed. When it was safe. But what had she done wrong? She'd just photographed sheep. Documented them. For conservation purposes. For science. How was that taking? How was that disrespect? She looked at her phone. At the photos she'd taken. The bighorns. And she noticed something. Something she hadn't seen while taking the pictures. In several of the shots. In the background. There was the figure. The shepherd. Standing on a distant ridge. Too far away to have reached her that quickly. Too far away to have spoken to her. But there. Watching. Present in the photos even though she hadn't seen him until he was close. Like he'd been there all along. Watching. Waiting for her to notice. To acknowledge. To understand. Elena deleted the photos. All of them. Every image of the sheep. Every documentation of her discovery. Erased them completely. Hoping that would be enough. That returning what she'd taken. The images. The data. The knowledge. Would satisfy the debt. Would end the warning. That night she packed. everything. Loaded her car, ready to leave at first light, ready to run, ready to abandon her sabbatical, her research, her plans, because the fear was too great, the stories too consistent, the encounter too real. She tried to sleep but couldn't, lay in bed watching the darkness, listening for what she didn't know, for footsteps, for voices, for anything that would confirm or deny, that would tell her if she was crazy or if the danger was real. Around 3 a.m. she heard it. Outside, the sound of something walking, slow, heavy, rhythmic, like someone with a staff. Tap, tap, tap on the ground, coming closer, approaching the cabin. Elena didn't move, didn't breathe, just listened. The footsteps circled the cabin. Once, twice, testing, checking, then stopped. At her front door, silence, long silence. Then, tap, 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 the staff knocking. 3 times, deliberate, measured. Then a voice, his voice, the shepherd's voice, deep, ancient, certain. 2 days, footsteps walking away, fading, gone, silence returning. Elena lay in darkness until dawn, then got in her car, drove, didn't look back, drove straight through. 6 hours, back to the city, back to her apartment, back to safety. She never returned to the cabin, forfeited her deposit, abandoned her belongings, ended her sabbatical early, told her colleagues she'd had a family emergency, personal reasons, couldn't continue, and she never went back to the mountains, never returned to that valley, never again set foot in the place where her grandmother had warned her, where the shepherd watched, where debts were tracked and prices exacted. 3 years have passed. Elena still has nightmares, still hears that voice. 2 days, still wonders what would have happened if she'd stayed, if she'd ignored the warning, if she'd let the 3rd day arrive. What price would she have paid? What would the shepherd have taken? Her work, her health, her life, someone she loved, something she couldn't name, something beyond conventional loss. She doesn't know, never wants to know, just grateful she listened. She ran, she escaped, she survived by taking the old stories seriously, by accepting that some warnings are real, some legends are true, some prices are too high to risk. The shepherd is still there, still watching, still protecting, still appearing to those who take from the land without understanding, without respect, without permission from whatever ancient agreement governs those mountains. And the warning still stands. 3 days, that's all you get. 3 days to return what you took, to leave, to understand that some places aren't ours, some resources aren't for taking, some boundaries aren't to be crossed. Elena learned. She listened. She survived. Because her grandmother's stories weren't just stories. They were history. They were warnings. They were truth wrapped in narrative, meant to protect, to guide, to save. And somewhere in those mountains, on high ridges where bighorns graze and winds howl, the shepherd still walks, still watches, still waits, patient, eternal, ready to appear, ready to warn, ready to exact prices from those who don't listen, don't believe, don't understand that the old stories are real, that legends persist because they're true, that warnings are repeated because they're necessary, that some debts must be paid, and some shepherds never stop watching their flocks. 3 days, that's all you get. 3 days to make it right, or face consequences you can't imagine, can't prepare for, can't escape. Elena knows. She remembers. She believes. And she never goes back to the mountains, never challenges the shepherd, never again takes what isn't freely given, because some prices are too high, some debts too permanent, some warnings too serious to ignore. The shepherd watches, always, forever, and his patience has no limit. But His mercy has boundaries, and crossing them costs more than anyone should pay. OUTRO. And so we reach the end of our journey together. 4 stories. 4 encounters with the boundaries of understanding. For moments when reality revealed itself to be stranger, deeper, more mysterious than we typically acknowledge. Thank you for spending these 2 hours with me, for listening, for opening yourself to possibilities that challenge comfort, that question certainty, that suggest the world contains more than we usually permit ourselves to believe. Rebecca learned that mirrors can show more than reflections. Martin discovered that some journeys never end. Sarah found voices within her speaking truths she didn't consciously know. And Elena understood that ancient warnings persist because they're necessary, because they're real. Each of these people was changed by their experience, changed in ways they couldn't undo, couldn't forget, couldn't rationalize away. They carry their encounters with them always. Reminders that the boundaries we draw between possible and impossible, between real and imagined, between known and unknown, those boundaries are more porous than we like to believe. Maybe you've had your own encounters, your own moments when something didn't fit, when reality seemed to flex, when the world showed you something it shouldn't contain. If so, you understand. You know what these people experienced. You carry your own stories, your own mysteries, your own questions without answers. And maybe that's okay. Maybe not everything needs explanation. Maybe the mystery itself, the not knowing, the uncertainty, maybe that's what makes existence profound. What makes experience meaningful. What reminds us we're part of something larger than our understanding can contain. The rain continues to fall. Steady, reliable, real. Let it bring you back now. Back to wherever you are. Back to your life, your world, your version of normal. And carry these stories with you. Not as truth, not as fiction, but as possibilities, as reminders, as windows into the vast unknown that surrounds us always. Thank you again for being here, for listening, for staying with me through these accounts. If you'd like to hear more stories like these, more journeys into the spaces between certainty and doubt, please subscribe. Join me again. There are always more stories, more encounters, more mysteries waiting to be shared. Until next time, sleep well, dream deeply, and remember that the world is larger than we know, stranger than we admit, and filled with possibilities we've only begun to glimpse. The rain falls, the night continues, and somewhere, always somewhere, someone is having an experience they'll never forget, never explain, never fully understand. An encounter with the impossible, a glimpse beyond the veil, a moment when everything they thought they knew revealed itself to be incomplete. Maybe next time that someone will be you. Maybe you'll have a story to tell. Maybe you'll discover that the boundaries are thinner than you believed. And maybe you'll understand what these 4 people learned. That reality is negotiable, that certainty is illusion, and that the unknown isn't something to fear, but something to respect, to acknowledge, to accept as part of the vast mysterious existence we all share. Good night. Sleep peacefully, and may your dreams be filled with wonder rather than fear, with curiosity rather than dread, with the understanding that mystery is gift, not curse. The rain falls, the darkness waits, and somewhere in between, stories continue. Always, forever.